our panel today, I mean, talk about a bunch of high achievers here. So I have to use notes here because all of their bios are so long, I had to pick and choose here. But I'm going to start with Mike McComb. Mike is a native of Park City. He enlisted in the Navy and served in Operation Desert Storm and then NATO operations in the former Yugoslavia. He was commissioned in 2000 and took part in Operation Enduring Freedom on board USS John F. Kennedy. He has a huge background in emergency management, which makes him the perfect fit to serve as Park City's emergency manager currently. At the end of 2016, when he left the Navy, he took over in Park City as our emergency manager, and we're so thankful to have you there. Shane Buchnowski is an Army man, and he's also a 2004 graduate of West Point, where he majored in international relations and systems engineering. Following graduation, Shane attended the Field Artillery Officer Basic Course and Ranger School, and shortly after deployed to Iraq. He was selected to attend the Special Forces Qualification Course in 2007 and spent the next few years leading teams on deployments, primarily in the North Africa region. Today, he works for Siemens in their aerospace and defense industry group. And as you already know, he's married to Rotarian Caitlin. And between the two of them, they have 3 boys, 2 dogs, and 0 free time. Doug Cherry. Wow. Your bio is absolutely unbelievable. Among many, many other things, he served as the Army's Tactical Wheeled Vehicle Requirements Staff Officer and Focused Logistics Branch Chief in the Army's G357. Is that it? His final assignment, he commanded the 76th Division Operational Response with nearly 7,000 soldiers and civilians spread across the globe. In addition to his 3 brigades, 10 battalions, and 44 line companies, he also commanded 16 specialized units, including our nation's only Consequence Management Unit and the Army's 2nd Space, what is BN? Battalion. Thank you. He had oversight of the Army Reserve elements in the combatant commands and defense support agencies. As the commander of the 76th, he was also responsible for the emergency preparedness liaison offices in all 10 FEMA regions and in every state. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And then there's Joe Grondley. One of our Rotarians, you know, and you've always been a puzzle to me, Joe, because I could never figure out whether I really admired you or I thought you were absolutely crazy for serving in the submarine division. I mean, who would want to go down there in a tube and without even a snorkel? Joe's military career began when he applied for Naval ROTC, and he got a scholarship to attend the University of Notre Dame. Upon graduation, he was selected to serve in the submarine force, and I have no clue why he would want to do that. Throughout his naval career, he lived in 7 different states in 8 years. He spent the majority of his time in the Navy on board USS Hogi in San Diego, serving as the Chemistry Radiological Control Officer and the Damage Control Officer. His last tour of duty in the Navy brought him to the University of Utah, where he served as the Associate Professor of Naval Science for the Naval ROTC program. In total, he served in active duty for 8 years. And Alex Brown, I've been fascinated by your bio. She enlisted in 1991 as a medical administration technician in the Air Force. And that was because there weren't a lot of jobs available to choose from for someone that was not a U.S. citizen at the time. We want to hear a little bit more about that. After she became a citizen, she gained her commission in 1998 and attended pilot training and flew the KC-135R. She attended Naval Postgraduate School and graduated with a Master in Security Studies. She worked at the Joint Staff, J5, as a strategist for Southeast Asia and the South China Sea. A fun fact is that she was the sole Pentagon representative for the U.S. convoy at the first U.S.-Burma Human Rights Dialogue. Welcome. And we also have a new member of our community. Steve is the new CEO of the Christian Center, and this is the first time that he's not lived on an Army base, Air Force base. His father, he joined the Air Force when he was 3 years old, so he grew up living on base, and then in his 24 years as an Air Force chaplain, he lived on base that entire time. So welcome to the real world out here today. And he's just got an amazing story and has had a great journey too. So I know you'll enjoy getting to know him as I have over the last few weeks. So let's jump right into some questions for you. All of you have been deployed, which is a really unique experience in and of itself. So I'm curious for each of you, what was the most challenging experience you had while deployed?
Is this working? Can you guys hear me? Okay. I think, there's always challenges. I think when I first started, I think my first couple of days of OGT were kind of really interesting. So, I was a West Point grad, went to Ranger School, like you mentioned, but it doesn't really get you ready for kind of the reality of what was happening at the time. It was early 2005 in Iraq, and it was kind of a lot of the security structure was devolving. It was not a great time to be there. And here I am, 23-year-old kid, responsible for 30 or so soldiers, and basically had to start deploying right away. So I finished Ranger School, went to Baghdad, and joined an active unit, took over command of a unit, and kind of went out really quickly. So it was hard in the sense of being in that leadership position, having to make decisions. I felt West Point and the training that I think a lot of folks in the military go through gave you the tactical knowledge to say, hey, we're going to do A, B, and C. This is how we have to operate. But the complexity of what was happening from a counterinsurgency standpoint, you didn't know who to trust. You didn't know who to go to. Half the time we couldn't talk to anybody anyways. Couldn't talk to any women at the time because we didn't have female interpreters. So it was a very complex time in Iraq. And then for me personally, it was, I was a 23-year-old kid trying to figure this out. And it was an eye-opening time for me, I'll say. Learned a lot real quickly.
Well, it's a great question, and I'd say that it kind of depended on the type of deployment. One of the very interesting things that I found was coming home from an operational standpoint. When the carrier deployed over to conduct airstrikes off the coast of Pakistan into Afghanistan, on the way we lost an aircraft while I was on the bridge, and it was one of those operational mishaps that you deal with. But how do you explain that to someone who hasn't necessarily lived through that or had to deal with the repercussions or the kind of the aftermath of it? One of the parts, so the Navy in particular, and I'm sure this is true for the other services too, has done a great job to recognize what some of the challenges of coming home are, and after a lengthy deployment, they fly out specialists to conduct briefings and talk about, hey, by the way, you've been in the inside of a ship for the last 7 months. Know that your depth perception is not the same, and so you're probably going to struggle with driving, which is interesting. Something that hadn't necessarily clicked for me. So dealing with that, but then also the homecoming with family, and all of a sudden, mom, who's been running the household and has been the kind of the commanding officer at home, has this, dare I say, intruder coming in with all sorts of ideas about how to run the command going forward. And she's like, dude,
doing this.
So that's definitely some of the challenges.
Alex.
I would say, just echoing the two gentlemen's comments, I think one of the things in the 135 is you're in a crew aircraft, and our aircraft in particular, if you're temporary duty away from home base, it's just you, the co-pilot, and the boom operator, and you can be on the road for 45 days, and you are the one making the decision. The self-questioning sometimes is, are you making the right choice for the three folks, including yourself, on this aircraft? It's so dynamic out there when you're on your own away from home base. I mean, you're still a phone call away and you still check in to home base, but it is so dynamic that plans always change. One of our motto was tankers always there on time. We do our best. But things are, it just, when they fluctuate and you have to make that decision, and you do wonder if you're making the right choice. You end up always making the right choice, because I will definitely say that the training we get is absolutely remarkable. You just know what the next steps are if the original step did not happen. You just know how to acclimate, you know how to move on, and you know how to make the decision. And I think that was always the remarkable part about my particular mission in my aircraft with a crew. And you're never assigned the same folks. You can fly with a different aircraft commander, a different co-pilot, different boom operator, and you could be on the road for 45 days, come home, go back out on the road 30 days later for another 45 days with two brand new people. And it's seamless. It's absolutely seamless. So our training, chain of command, it is pretty remarkable how we can adapt to anything out there.
So, wow, that is actually a tough question, but I think I agree with where Mike is. So, as you mentioned, so I spent a lot of time in uniform, 37 years and over 30 countries. And some deployments were peacetime deployments, things like a JRTC rotation, and some were overseas. And whether training, bravado, or something else, I always felt like with my team, I knew what to do when I was deployed. But reintegration, every time was hard. There was never time. And once I had kids, you hit it. I would come home and I was not part of it. And I didn't know what had happened in the school, and I didn't know what had happened with friends. And I always thought this time it will be easier, and it never was. So I would definitely say that was, for me, the biggest challenge was how to reintegrate each time. So.
Joe.
Many people here might think that I'm still reintegrating. Anyway, when my time in the service, I wasn't married, didn't have kids. I don't think my wife Kelly would have liked me those years, but I think the biggest challenge, and I think all of these are really good challenges for sure, and worth commenting, would be just the sleep deprivation. I think we're trained on leadership and trained to operate our equipment and machinery, and we know our mission and we know the strategy and everything, but it's hard to mimic the sleep deprivation that actually happens when it needs to happen. And I can remember multiple times, being up for 48 hours straight, and there's probably people here on the panel that did double that or more. But it really affects the decision making, and it's hard to work well with your teammates when everybody's really fighting sleep deprivation.
Steve.
Do that. So my toughest was 2008. My first deployment was to outside of Kandahar, Afghanistan. I was the Air Force Academy chaplain. If you've ever seen the big Spire Chapel, I was the main chaplain for there, and just had the most amazing time as the football chaplain for a D1 football team, and got to do wonderful things. And then I got sent from there to Kandahar to work for the Army, and then sent out to Little Fobs, where I just didn't feel like I was doing any good. And my struggle in deployment was feeling like a failure. So about halfway through, my commander got blown up in a roadside bomb and got killed. Two of my privates got killed in the same situation. And then about a month later, I was sent to, I volunteered really to go out and visit a fire base in the mountains of Afghanistan. And we had a number of special forces, and I made a mistake and showed up to a clinic in uniform, and so they could see my cross. They then, the young ladies there that saw my cross told the Taliban. The Taliban then put a price on my head, and I put everybody that I was with in danger. And so for the next 4 days, we couldn't get me off the fire base, no transportation, and it was just a really tough time for me, feeling like I had put these people that I had sacrificed my life for, that I would do anything for, and there was nothing I could do to keep them out of danger as a chaplain, other than pray.
Thank you all for sharing all of that. Let's switch now to your proudest accomplishment while you're in the service. Joe, let's start with you. What are you proudest of your time?
Pride is the great sin. That's what C.S. Lewis said, I think. Anyway, what am I proudest of? I guess, yeah, for me, I just really liked the idea of serving my country and being part of a team and being part of something bigger than myself, which, coming out of high school when I joined the Navy, like most high schoolers, I was very self-absorbed, and I think it was about exactly what I needed, was to be a part of a team and be part of a cause that was bigger than myself.
John.
Yeah. So when in 2006, I got sent to the Pentagon for the first time. And like a lot of people who get that kind of assignment, you fight it, right? I was a cool soldier. I don't go to the Pentagon. And that turned out to be probably the best assignment I've ever had, because I got to do something that probably saved more lives than anything I ever did on a deployment. I was actually brought there because of something I'd done in civilian life that they knew about my background in systems development. And originally they brought me in to try to solve this problem that we designed and developed, the up-armored Humvee. When I got there, they were still strapping cast iron in some cases on, and we were trying to develop what was called a spall liner to protect the soldiers from this spall that would just break out when it got hit because it fractured. But in August of 2006, my boss, Lieutenant General Lovelace, he was the 3-star of the G357, the Army. He got a note from his boss, who was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Cody. They were called Blue Notes. And it said simply, Jim, by the way, I never called General Lovelace Jim. It said, Jim, we're not going to make it to JLTV. We need a replacement for up-armored Humvee today. About 4:30 that afternoon, I got called into his office, and he asked me what the answer was. We didn't have a solution that day, but over the next 7 months, we developed MRAP. And I got to lead the team that did that. And we, within 13 months of that coming in, we were delivering the first MRAPs into theater, fully kitted, outfitted, and it saved more lives. And so even though I got to command much larger organizations, that was probably my proudest thing.
Awesome. Alex.
Oh, gosh, to follow that. I would probably say my time, unbelievably, at the Pentagon, one moment of, I'm trying to think of the year now. I believe it was 2012. The tsunami hit Japan. I had just taken over the Japan desk, the country director for Japan, as a temporary takeover, just because the person that was there had deployed. So I took over, I think it was 4 months into it, and the tsunami hit. Fukushima reactor was destroyed, and we had a nuclear disaster in Fukushima. We ended up calling it Operation Tomodachi, and I remember so specifically working night and day, and talk about sleep deprivation. It was, sleeping on the couch at the Pentagon, and at the time I had almost a newborn, that I'd have to run home, feed, come back to the Pentagon. But it was truly remarkable to be able to call my counterpart at the Japan embassy and inform them, call them as I'm driving to the Pentagon saying, did you hear what happened? I'm hoping your family's okay. He goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he calls me back and he goes, okay, we need to set up whatever partnership we can between the Pentagon and the Japanese embassy. And we did instantaneously. It was almost immediate, where we set up command posts for Operation Tomodachi from the Pentagon, working with the Japanese embassy and working with the CHOD, Chairman of Defense, it stands for, which is the chairman for Japan, who traveled all the way to the Pentagon to meet with Admiral Mullen at the time, who was the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it was Oriki, General Oriki, his aide, Admiral Mullen, and myself in the room, and they discussed what was going to happen next. And it was probably one of my moments I could be proud of, because it was truly tangible and we were truly part of something that mattered for both sides. So
Fantastic. Mike.
So another really tough question. I mean, I would echo, I'd echo all the comments about it being a team effort, and everything that got accomplished was the result of a truly coordinated effort and of a lot of people's dedication. So I've been thinking about a couple of potential answers here. And I'll go way back to my first days as a chief petty officer, which is a senior enlisted non-commissioned officer, kind of newly minted, and was on the staff of the Commander 6th Fleet. And this was something that I did, and so I'll call it out. We had one of our junior sailors who had committed a minor infraction while in one of our Liberty ports. Which happens, Joe. And the chief of staff for the 3-star admiral was considering imposing non-judicial punishment on this young man who had been in trouble before. As a chief petty officer, I went to him and I said, "Look, man, this doesn't fly." But to the young sailor, and talked to him and kind of got his side of the story. And when I was up there with my boss, who was the Judge Advocate General, and this young sailor supervisors and the chief of staff, and he said, "So I'm thinking about this." And I said, "Sir, if I may." Feeling my new anchors as a new chief petty officer, and said, I think we need to give this guy another chance, and said my piece. The chief of staff looked at me and said, "Everyone else is dismissed. Chief, hang out for a minute." And I said, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" And he said, so after everyone had left, he said, so tell me more about this. And I said, "Sir, he's a young man. He made a bad mistake. Really pretty minor when you talk to the people who are involved. He's got a wife and kids. This is probably his final offense, because we're going to have to kick him out if you take him to mass." And the chief of staff said, "You're dismissed. Get out." And I went on my way, and found out about 30 minutes later that he decided to change his mind, and he wasn't going to hold the young man accountable this time, as long as the chief petty officer who took responsibility for him would step up and get this young man to fly straight. So we had a little come to Jesus meeting, the young man and I, and I kind of went on our separate ways and finished our tours. So fast forward 5 years, and I was now a commissioned officer, walking through the parking lot in Mayport, Florida, and I heard heard a voice say, "Lieutenant McComb, Lieutenant McComb." And lo and behold, it was this young man who was now a first-class petty officer, dual warfare qualified, had completely changed his career, and was now a leader in his department. And I'd like to think that I had something to do with that.
What a success story. That's great. Jane.
So I would echo, I think, kind of one of the primary sentiments, like working together on a team, and really working on a mission together, right? Trying to accomplish a goal. That was, I think, for me, the thing that I take the most pride in, how I reflect back. I had one specific experience in Iraq. I was sent kind of up to northern Iraq with a group, and no one had been up there for a long time, so it was kind of an unknown. And the mission brief was almost sort of laughably nothing. It was like, hey, go up there and figure it out, right? We don't know what's going on. It was a kind of a confluence of three major tribal groups, so there was a lot of ethnic tension. The local governance, right? The community had basically shut down. Nothing occurred. Schools were out. There was no police force. There was no anything. It was just kind of a void. And through a lot of hard work, right? We were kind of smack dab in the Syrian desert, so hot and dusty pretty much all the time. A lot of hard work, working with USAID agencies to bring in money, but really kind of turned the area around through the hard work of the team, right? And figuring out what was going on. By the time we left 6 or 7 months later, it looked like a normal town, right? Folks were out going to get dinner together, and the city council was back together. Schools were running. We had repaired a lot of the damaged infrastructure to bring clean water in. So it was that kind of tangible, like, impact to a community that we could see it. So it was really meaningful as a young man to participate in that and be part of something and actually see, like, hey, for all the chaos that was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan at the time, you're like, we took this small thing and better, and it was very kind of like a tangible outcome.
Awesome. Steve.
All right, last one.
Okay.
So 2005, the Air Force sent me to the Army to get a master's in marriage and family therapy and to work at the Fort Hood PTSD clinic. After that, they tasked me with writing a marriage retreat. And so I was able to work for about a year writing a retreat to help marriages grow stronger and be able to survive through all the things that we've talked about. I was able to test it all over the world, trained 450 chaplains, traveled to dozens, if not hundreds of locations, and 20,000 airmen and spouses went through my program with a 99.4% success rate.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I've been able to help a lot of young marriages.
I love that. Thank you. And that's a great note. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I promised you a really accomplished and distinguished panel today, and I know they didn't disappoint. So let's all show them our appreciation. Thank you all.